So Andrew, you grew up on a property, so how much has the industry changed since you were first involved?
Well, look, firstly I'd like to say I'm totally delighted to be supporting BeefEx. And yeah, the industry's changed enormously. I did grow up in a evolution from sheep to cattle. Cattle was clearly much more profitable. It was an industry which commanded respect throughout the Australian economy and throughout the Australian social systems. It seems to have slid back, and I certainly have a dream and a vision for it, that it can recover to at least that standing. It's a fantastic industry. Food industry is a very noble industry to be involved in, and I'd like to see it get back there.
Minderoo Investments weren't seen as a potential buyer of Harvey Beef initially, so they took the industry by surprise. What was your motivation for purchasing the business?
Look, we'd been looking at the food industry for some years, and you know, the opportunity came up. We obviously have a very broad and deep relationship with China, and Harvey Beef was a great fit to that.
What is your vision for Harvey Beef, and what do you think is the role for the grain-fed beef cattle sector within it?
Well, Harvey Beef, I think, has got a great opportunity to secure a key part of an enormous market in China. I'd really like to do it to lift the beef industry in Western Australia. If we can have great communication between ourselves as purchasers, farmers as suppliers, and really let them know what our markets need most and have farmers breed to type, then I think we'll have a much more prosperous industry. Grain-fed, like grass-fed, has real roles in taste for customers, and I think grain-fed has a great industry, has a great future.
Have you found any valuable synergies between your iron ore and your beef cattle businesses?
Well, only that when I met with the Premier of China, he had put me on notice previously in the day that the issue that was pressing upon him most was the subject of food safety and food security for his people. And that, of course, was easy for me to embrace because I was up there chairing the Senior Business Leaders Forum, the top business people of both China and Australia. And food security was right on our agenda. So I committed with the Premier that we would start a meeting whereby we would generate certain communications between Australian suppliers and Chinese consumers. This would rid all that difficulty, confusion and loss of market share which we have by having so many intermediaries between producers and consumers. And it's not the loss of profit so much that damages producers, it's the loss of information as it gets distorted from what the consumer wants in the plate to what we can produce in the paddock, and to get us both together to have Australia become a key part of Chinese food security matrix. That was my ambition.
China's a good segue. It's significant that you've been involved with the implementation of the 100-year Sino-Australia trade partnership. Could you explain the significance of that long-term partnership?
Okay, everyone around China, Uruguay, Brazil, Argentina, all are competing for what they see as being the Chinese market. Because I've had the really deep relationship through the iron ore sector where we have, you know, $15, $20 billion a year turnover into that market, we've obviously developed some wonderful relationships which have been built up over years and years of trust. So I'd like to deploy that to really grow China's trust in the Australian agricultural sector and particularly the Australian beef sector, and have them have complete faith in us that our supply, our quality, our quarantine standards are the best in the world. Now ask them to give us long-term projections of the food which they would like us to supply, and then have Australia and particularly the beef industry supply into that.
You've purchased Harvey Beef at a time of great volatility in domestic and export markets as a result of declining cattle inventories. What do you see is key to maintaining our customer base into the future in the wake of this challenge?
Yeah, I don't think we should maintain our place. I think we've just begun to fight. I think we should really look at growing our base, growing our herds, and supplying markets with a much greater certainty and reliability and much fewer middlemen in the middle. The ASA 100, and we're still happy to have people join us, it isn't an exclusive club. It's there to build the Australian industry to at least the prosperity that it was when I was a kid. And getting China to communicate directly with us as Australia about what they need long term, the type of food that they need long term, the quality, etc., then allow our farmers with that information to grow to that type, to grow to that specification, to grow to that volume. And that'll see us secure a much brighter future for our farmers.
You've publicly commented that Australian agriculture has a level of inequity between producers and those further up the supply chain, namely wholesalers and retailers. What steps do you think should be undertaken to bring that profitability back to producers?
I think particularly with export markets, there's way too many middlemen. We counted actually 19 between the paddock and the plate with our exports into China. I think bringing in Asia into the Australian agricultural and food supply business, beef supply business, is like bringing in another Coles or bringing in another Woolworths. And I think competition is a good thing. It's a great thing for farmers. It's a great thing for consumers. And when prices get pushed down too much by consumers, say like the big wholesalers, then they actually, in competing against just each other, they begin to hurt the very producers from which they rely. Now, I'd like to see that situation stopped, and if we bring in other competition for Australian cattle and Australian beef, then of course everyone wins.
So you think it's more of an export demand focus that we should be, putting our emphasis?
Yes, I think Australia has punched above its weight all over the world in all sorts of resources. It's been too reliant on domestic markets. We need to lift our volume, lift our game, and lift our exports.
Whilst consumers' interest in food has never been stronger, their understanding of the industry that produces it, agriculture, has never been lower. How do you think sectors such as the feedlot industry can, educate a largely ignorant community?
I think that we need to look at the lessons which were learnt by the global mining industry. There's a major move against mining by people who had really no idea. And to show how great mining is as an exporter, as an earner of export earnings, as an employer, as a mainstay to economy, as a sustainable industry, we also had to show their one big weak point they imagined in us, which was environment. And when I began to, and others joined me, to basically preach, we won't start a mine unless we can be assured that we leave the environment at least as good as we found it. And if that's not competitive, then that's too bad. We won't start that mine. That stripped away any possible criticism of any part of the mining industry because it's environmentally friendly, it's totally sustainable, it's a great employer of people, it produced export revenues from which this country relies. It was a model industry. Now with beef production and grain beef production, we need to recognise that there is a wave of opposition out there. It's not collectivised yet, but I've seen it all over the world. And the opposition is basically around animal libertarian rights and the rest of it, basically the happiness of the animal. Now, I think that's perfectly addressable. I find wherever I go in the world that food is a noble business. It is a business which anyone, all of the members of your conference should feel really proud of. But let's cut away the criticism before it really collectivises. Let's ensure that, outside of that half hour during castration and branding and earmarking, etc., we can say to anyone in the world, our cattle have lived contented lives, and at the end of that, they will be pain and fear free. No pain, no fear. And if we can do that, then we've removed out of the clutches of potential enemies to the beef industry the very weapon which they think they need. That means that in the feedlot industry, we should make sure our cattle have room to move. They should have room to roam, that they are not feeling any stress about being in yards which are too tight, being handled too much, etc., and that they are living comfortable, stress-free lives. And if we can always demonstrate that and prove that, then the Australian grain-fed industry has nothing to worry about.
Animal welfare is a sensitive issue in the cattle feedlot sector. Are we doing enough to address this issue?
Look, I think we're getting so much better in that feedlot. We're sensitive to what the markets are saying. We're out there, we're always trying to improve the conditions of our cattle. I think that's great. Really, my concern is not if you're in yarded cattle, paddock cattle, feedlot or not. That's not my concern. My concern is, as a person who's in the noble industry of breeding, growing and selling cattle for a wonderful market, there are people and organisations right across the world who are looking at cattle per se, not just yarded cattle or paddock cattle, but cattle per se, and we should as an industry be as extensive or intensive, we should as an industry be making sure that we can answer all of those questions, that our cattle are content. At the end of their lives, they have no pain, no fear, and they've lived basically good, sound, content lives. Then we can face down those forces. But this is not for the grains industry per se alone, or the paddock industry per se alone. This is us together.
Mining and agriculture have come under increasing conflict in recent years. Do you think both of these industries can sustainably coexist?
Yeah, I see no reason why it shouldn't. If miners aren't doing what say we've done, which is reaching great agreements with farmers that each one's comfortable with, then we shouldn't be in the business. I have cattle stations and we have mining interests looking at it all the time. I also have a very large mining business, and with 500 plus kilometres of railway lines now, we've had to shift the course of our railway lines so they're further away from horse yards, or they take a wide berth around a homestead. The cost to that is really significant. It would be so much better just to buy the station. But I actually really believe that the cockies are out there doing a great job. They're there long before us. They should be respected. And it's in every time just showing respect, it's been easy to reach agreement.
Andrew, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today.
No worries, thank you, and good luck with the conference.